Hello and welcome to this noisy classroom debate. The motion today is this House would lower the voting age to 12. The motion is being used today due to the current argument in Parliament about whether the voting age should be lowered to 16. All of the speakers today are aged 14 or 15, so we think that they should be quite opinionated about this motion. The debate today is a three-a-side debate. Both the first and second speakers will give 3-minute speeches. This will then be followed by a floor debate in which the floor will ask questions. Finally, we'll finish with 2 summary speeches which will both be 2 minutes long. In both of the summary speeches, no points of information will be given. During your speech, after 30 seconds, you'll hear this. This signals the end of your protected time and points of information can now be asked. After 2 minutes 30, you'll hear this. This means that you're back into protected time. At 3 minutes, you'll hear this. This means that you need to begin to wrap up your debate. And at 3 minutes 15, you'll hear this. And this means that you need to promptly finish. So I'd now like to hand over to our first speaker to begin the case for the proposition.
Everyone has a right to be heard. Today I have 3 main points for you, ladies and gentlemen. The first one is expressing your opinions. Second one is voting is a part of education. The third one is understanding society. My partner will then go on to talk to you about increasing voting numbers, long-term voting, and the course funding. This is our main point of our debate. Firstly, I'd like to tell you about the mechanism for this debate. From the age of 10, we would like to start children learning about politics. This means they will have politics education for 2 years before they have their first vote. So on to my first point, expressing your opinion. Many people complain that younger people aren't heard. This means that they can't express their opinions enough. 3 things that really affect children today are schools, the healthcare and police, and they don't have the chance to vote for them. By giving them the vote, they have the chance to say what they believe about these 3 things. The government limit many things from children that my partner will go on to explain in her speech. They will feel more involved by letting them express their opinions. Going on to my second point. Voting is a part of education. Learning to vote is a key part of education. Teachers are going to have to teach a balance of these parties, which means if they supported the Conservatives, they couldn't favour the Conservatives. They would have to give an equal teaching of all the parties, which means it will give the children a positive influence, and they will be able to decide. I'll take you in a minute. The children will be able to decide what party they would vote for.
What right is given to 12-year-olds that means they can vote? What exclusively are we lowering this age to? What right is there?
When you get to the age of 12, you mature more and you become more grown up and you find yourself and the character you want to be. So we think when you get to 12, that is the age that you get the responsibility to vote. Going on to my third point, society. Children will learn more about society. Society is a massive thing today, and we feel that we should be encouraging more people to get involved, not sitting at home, and we think that they need to step into the real life, and this will help them. So, what have I told you today? I have told you that we think that learning to vote is a key part of education. It means 12-year-olds are more involved in society, and they can be more involved in things like education, health, and they can have a say in what they believe in. For all the points I have said today, and for all the points my partner will go and say, please propose the motion.
We thank you for your speech and we'd like to welcome the first speaker for the opposition.
The voting age should not be lowered to 12. I've got 3 main points for you today on why that is. Firstly is the lack of understanding that a 12-year-old has. Second is the influence by other parties they have. And thirdly is the fact that they are not able to make evidence-based decisions yet because they're not old enough. So my first point, lack of understanding. So they will be voting for what affects them. We got the example of education, that's what I'm going to use as my example. However, they're not impartial to how education works because they're still in the education system, so they don't actually know, as a 12-year-old, what all the positives and negatives are of a school system and what a school really needs to work and be good and educate them well. So why should they be voting on this when they're still in it, and to them the priority is, we don't want homework, we want longer holidays, when that's really not going to be what's best for them in the future. And also they have other outlets for changing stuff like this, so for example school council, and they shouldn't really have the whole vote and be able to vote and affect people with their pensions and their taxes and all these other things that votes affect, when actually all they want to affect is very specific things towards them, which they can do anyway through other outlets, so we don't see that as a necessary thing. My second point is the fact that they can be influenced by other parties, for example, parents or teachers. We've all seen it before. You're someone close to you and they tell you their opinion and you're slightly swayed by that opinion, and you might have your own opinion, but knowing their opinion will have slightly changed your mind on that matter perhaps. And especially as a 12-year-old, this is going to be a very strong thing, and as you get older you learn to really know what your own opinions are. But for example, teachers in private schools perhaps may be more likely to be right-wing, and so you'll get much more private schools children who are more likely to be voting right-wing because they're sort of surrounded by people who are perhaps saying this is the sort of thing that they should be voting for, which we haven't really had clarified that that's not going to happen, so yeah. And also, as a 12-year-old, you do have these people as your role models, whereas when you're older, for example, 18, which is what the voting age is, you're able to know what your own mind is with these things and decide for yourself and not have someone else's opinion change what your opinion is on it. And my third point is that they are not really in the place to make evidence-based decisions. So let's go for a stereotypical 12-year-old, You're sitting at home on your Xbox, eating what sits and drinking Mountain Dew. That is essentially your life. You're just in your bedroom and you're not experiencing the outside world. Yes.
What's the difference between an immature 12-year-old and an immature 18-year-old?
We think by the time you're 18, you have all these other things in your life which you're able to do. For example, you're able to smoke, you're able to drink alcohol, you're able to have sex, and the sorts of things you're voting on are the things that are going to affect you. So at least you know in that knowledge that it will affect you. Whereas as a 12-year-old, you're not really aware of what's going on in the outside world, so why should you be able to vote on that? And so we heard from the speaker the idea of you mature when you're 12. However, they're not mature. They are maturing. They're not already mature people. They're still actually immature and not responsible, so we don't think they should have the vote yet, and they should have it at an older age. So for all I've said, and all my partners will say, I beg you to oppose the motion.
Thank you for your speech, and we'd like to ask the second speaker to continue the case for the proposition.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today on the proposition, we strongly believe that we should lower the voting age to 12. Today I've got three main points about the increase in the amount of voting numbers, the long-term effect of voting, and my main point is about examples of how us as children are affected and how we can't, at the moment, vote on them. But to start off, I have a bit of rebuttal for the first opposition speaker. She said that, at the age of 12, we're voting for other things such as pensions, which we're not going to be affected by yet. But then you could say that a 90-year-old, if they're voting on things for pensions, which will affect them, but also they're voting for education, which will not affect them as they've already been through that stage. And also she said that at 12, you can be swayed by other people's views, but surely you can be swayed by other people's views at any age, because often at older ages, such as 18, you can still be prone to peer pressure and things like that. So on to my first point about the increase in voting numbers. At the moment, there's been a decrease in the amount of adults that are actually voting for a party in the general election. If we lower the voting age to 12, there may be more people who will be interested in voting, especially people in the older end of the spectrum, like 16, who could vote because things will affect them. But also at 12, if...
You are?
No, thank you. My partner said about being educated in politics from the age of 10, that will mean people at the age of 12, when they get there, can vote, and they will want to vote because they'll have an insight in these things. There will also be a wide range of opinions in, coming out of the election, from children who are younger who want education things to change, and then from the people who are older, and then there could be a more balanced parliament.
Point of information?
No, thank you. My second point is about the long-term effect of voting, about how they'll be educated in politics from a young age, and this means they may keep an interest in it and then want to vote, which connects to my first point about how the voting numbers will increase. My third point is about how we are affected and how we can't
Point
vote
of
for them.
information?
Yes, please.
What benefit does society gain from increasing voting numbers?
Well, it shows that there'll be more votes, so then there may be more of a spread that will enable more parties to get seats in Parliament, because at the moment, in the most recent election, there was a massive Conservative win, and they may not have been as much votes, and so then there may be a possible balance, and then more society can be helped by this and more views in Parliament. So my final point, here in Suffolk, we're coming to a point where they're going to close the middle schools and go into a tutor system which we are unfamiliar with. But no one has actually asked the children it's going to affect on how they feel about this. If we lower the voting age to 12, which is the age range of people that this will actually affect, then we know how they feel and whether they actually want this to change, because it's going to have a big impact on them. So what have I told you today? I've told you that there will be an increase in voting numbers, which means there will be a balance in Parliament. I've also told you about the long-term effects on voting and how we need to vote, because there are issues that are going on right now that affect us. So for all I've said and all the rest of the bench will say, I beg you to propose.
We thank you for your speech, and we'd like to welcome the second speaker for opposition to speak.
Under the current system, 12-year-olds are told that they can't pay tax, they can't get married, they can't own a home, they haven't experienced higher education, they haven't experienced having a family or saving for a pension, or what pensions even do. So we ask that, why should children be given a vote on things that they have very little knowledge about? Why should a 12-year-old still at school be given this opportunity to greatly affect a society that has far more knowledge about a world where they have very little understanding of, because they're still stuck in a classroom, because they're told they believe in every word a teacher tells them? So we say that when you give a child of 12 the vote, it means that they're given they're supposed to gain all these opinions on things that matter, and things that probably don't matter to them, like the things I've listed. But what they do care about is what we've been told is about education. And one thing in the masses of things that government policies cover, and they're told that actually this opinion, yes, this is valid, but also we're not going to count your opinions, and we're not going to validate these because you're 12 and they have little effect on you. So when you vote, you're going to see no effect on education or on pensions. But the greater society is 40, 50-year-olds are going to see the effects that a 12-year-old decides to vote because they like one policy they see on the educational system. We see that this is really damaging because it greatly affects people who have this understanding, who have experienced stuff. And what we say is people vote on experience. People vote on the fact that they see a situation and they want change or they want it to stay the same. This is how people vote. We say that as a 12-year-old, you're highly unlikely to have experienced something that you think drastically needs changing, or think that something's incredibly wrong, or that it's some sort of bizarre capitalist experiment, or it's immoral, or some terrorism plot, and you think that the government should be doing something. We think as a 12-year-old you're probably more interested in computer games. Yes, please.
Shouldn't we be encouraging children to look at the world in a bigger space, not just in their classroom or in their home? We should be telling them to look out at the bigger picture.
So as 10-year-olds, we choose not to teach them about politics because we don't think they understand it. We choose them not to teach about sex ed because we still don't think they understand it. Like, all these things that we don't think 10-year-olds are capable to understand because they're, like, developing children. So as a 12-year-old, it's highly unlikely that you're going to have a knowledge of the greater world and what sort of atrocities are going on. We think that this is very irrelevant to a child, and it further disengages these people. So when you're told that your votes have very little involvement, you're disengaged. Then it just annoys the rest of the society that are being affected by these 12-year-olds. We also want to mention that 12-year-olds don't pay tax. They don't have a national insurance number. So why should they be given a vote? If they don't contribute anything to this government, to this society, why are their opinions suddenly more valid than all those taxpayers? Like, this balance doesn't make sense. We think that giving 12-year-olds is severely damaging because it's providing an opinion that has no funders. So for all the points I've said about the disengagement of these 12-year-olds because their votes have little effect on them, and we'll only see it in the future years when they're 16, when they're 18, when they're able to vote under the current system, and why it further gives the government less money to fund more opinions, which we think is really damaging. And for all the points I've said, my partner said, and my other partner is going to go on to say, we beg you to oppose the motion.
I'd now like to ask the floor to ask questions. Any questions from the floor? Yes, please.
How can you guarantee that an education in politics will enfranchise young people and make them want to vote?
Another question? Yes, please.
It's a question of the proposition. Why 12? Why not 11 to 13? Like, what is distinctive about age 12 that means your points apply?
Any other points? Yes, please.
Do you not believe children should have a say in their future rather than having other people in government who are older than them decide it for them?
Any more points from the floor? Yes?
Yeah, so this is a point for the opposition. There are certain groups of people who still get the vote, like unemployed people or people who aren't in a pension scheme. What distinguishes them, do you think, from 12-year-olds to not get the vote, even though the same things don't affect them that don't affect 12-year-olds?
One last point? Yes?
I don't feel as though I understand some aspects of politics, so I wouldn't want to be voting on something that I don't fully understand that could affect everybody's future. Why should 12-year-olds who are still learning get the vote?
Thank you for the floor's contribution, and we now move to the summary speeches as we welcome the final speaker for opposition.
I'm 12 now, Mum. I can do whatever I want. The proposition today have massively overplayed the maturity of 12-year-olds. I have two main points of clash for you today. Are 12-year-olds responsible enough to vote? We say no. And will it have a positive impact on themselves and others in society? We also say no. So my first point of clash today. We believe that 12-year-olds have a lack of experience. You had a question about what makes it different from older people. We think they have experience. They've been able to drink, smoke, join the army. 12-year-olds can't do this. They can't even have Facebook, so they can't really do much. They don't have the experience. Also, we've had a lot of points brought up, like you, who said that we need how a 12-year-old is going to get their points across. And we think there are places like school council, they can speak to them MPs or talk to newspapers, and that's a way they can get their voice across. We also think that there are many influences on 12-year-olds which are bad, like the media, teachers, parents. So no matter what the propositions say, teachers will still have an opinion which might swing onto the children. And we think at 12 you haven't been able to form your own opinion yet. Also a problem with the mechanism is that they said about 10-year-olds learning. We don't think 10-year-olds will actually care about politics. So on to my second point of clash, which is will it have a positive impact on them and the rest of society? To which we say no. 12-year-olds will realise that their vote has very little impact, so then they might start not voting. As my partner went on to say about how they'll become disenfranchised with politics. They won't bother to vote anymore because they will realise that their vote has very little effect if it's just going to really affect their education, as the proposition may make out. So what have we told you today? We have told you how that it's bad, they're not responsible enough to vote, and that it will not have a positive impact on them or the rest of society. So for all the points myself and my teammates have said today, please vote for the opposition.
We thank you for your speech, and we'd now like to welcome the last speaker to wrap up the debate.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I've identified two main points of clash. The first of which is the idea that young people, we think, can understand politics, and also why we think their votes would be worth something. So firstly, about this idea of understanding politics. What first personal proposition talked about was this idea of bringing in these 2 years where they were taught about politics, and we think this is very important because what it does is it teaches them the basics they need to know and more advanced things, so they are able to get an advanced view on the person they can vote for. A point that was made by last speaker on opposition was this idea of maturity, which was also brought up by the floor. We think they are mature enough. We think at 12 years old they're going into secondary school, and we think they're able to have their opinions. We do think there could potentially be their opinions affected by the people around them, but we think that would be no more than any other person at any other age could be. So also, on the young people understanding politics, there's also this idea throughout the debate of the lack of experience, and we think they have more experience than anyone in the issues that they would be voting for, particularly education. They're right in the middle of education, leaving their primary schools, which they obviously know the most about as they're at the highest point of that, and going into their secondary schools. We also think the issues they can talk about, such as the idea of like university fees and things like that, which will affect them later in life, which we think they need to talk about. There's also been this idea of other areas they can talk to, such as school councils, but we don't think they have as much change as an actual vote would, such as giving money so they can open up these A-level courses which they might want to do. So as well as this, why their worths might be worth something. We think, as I've said just earlier, they open up different options for them, such as A-level courses and university options. And just like other people, some of their things they would vote for obviously wouldn't affect them, but that's the same with everybody. The fact is, there are things that affect us, such as education, health and police. So for all of these points, we need a vote. So I beg you to propose this motion.
I'd like to call for a vote from the floor on this motion. All in favour of the proposition, raise your hand. All against the motion, raise your hand. It's an opposition win.